Hello again, everybody. Welcome back for some more Dead Money. This will be my final episode before the start of the 2025 Major League Baseball season, so I'll be a bloodhound loser with that once that starts. Wasting all my time watching men who don't know me play a sport and care about how they do at their job. Even though none of them know me and probably never will. And if they did, probably wouldn't care about how I'm doing at my job. But that aside, I promised some 510 hand histories the next time I'd address any hand histories, but I actually still haven't gotten around to playing any 510 just yet. This is already kind of starting to remind me of the 510, 10, 20 days of old from when I was in my 20s. I'd always talk about playing poker and then just never do it. Not literally never, of course, but it would frequently get derailed by distractions because playing professional poker requires a lot of vacation time. It does not allow a lot of vacation time. It requires it. You need to take time for yourself. There is too many gut-wrenching things that are going to happen or that if you don't pull back at times, you're going to cost yourself more than you're going to make. So like they say, work smarter, not harder. And it's hard being your own boss. It's hard to work smarter, not harder, because you have to make these decisions. Because these spots all come without warning. It's always one day to the next, where suddenly you're just like, fuck this. And you have to be able to pull the reins on yourself when the game starts getting to you. And it's going to because it's supposed to, because how could it not? This is poker, people. It's just like life. And it's so hard that sometimes the only thing to do is stop and sit still. And stop worrying so much about doing more. Just regroup and relax and enjoy some of the success you've had. You don't got to be an active professional player all the time. For the period of 3.5 years where I played like maybe 6 months worth of poker in that time. And when you've recharged and feel rejuvenated and the itch to battle again, then you go back out and you start fucking everybody up again. But the rest is just as important as the work. Same as any amount of time you spend in the gym or athletes in pro sports. You can't just be running on this hamster wheel 24/7. Now, everyone's threshold is going to vary for when they need time and how much they need, but it's going to happen to everybody. And if it doesn't happen to you anymore and now you're just a robot addicted to playing poker, well then does that sound like a description of someone who has truly beaten the game and done what they set out to achieve, just being a slave to the table? So in the past week, I've just been busy goofing around with some other things, but I did have a minor itch to play, so I actually put in a couple of sessions at 1-3. Now, each game was only 2 hours since I'm not really looking to grind these stakes. I hadn't played a hand at all of 1-3 in a few months, but I'll still play it once in a while in a brief little spurt just when I really want to play some cards. You know, get a little trigger time in, but without plunging in face forward looking to dance with the devil. Jungle Man does the same thing. Occasionally, you see him playing 1-3 at the win. Now, I had no intention of even mentioning anything from these games, but small stakes players are who they are, and they'll never be able to help themselves from saying and doing completely jaw-dropping things. So, I guess I should have expected a couple of stories to come out of this. So here they are. So the first game was at Resorts World. There was a man sitting next to me. He's not an old man coffee, but he will be in 10 years. So for now, we'll just say he's in training. So he's on my right, and then he took an open seat a few seats away. I thought nothing of it at the time, but after seeing what happened, something tells me maybe he just didn't want me on his left. Even though I had just joined the game and hadn't really thought to have even done anything that would indicate having me on your left is a real problem. But whatever the reason was, I raised a 12 under the gun with ace-7 of clubs. A fishy player calls in the middle, and the OMC trainee calls, and we go three-way. It comes queen 8-4, 2 clubs, so I got the nut flush draw, and something that just occurred to me. Why does everyone that ever does any hand history analysis, myself included, always feel the need to say in spots like this, "Oh, I can check or bet with this hand"? As if that isn't already the most obvious fucking thing in the world. Anyone listening to this podcast or any podcast about poker would already know that. So what are we saying it for? Whatever. Anyway, so I bet zero. The next player called, and the OMC trainee raised my bet of $0 to $30. This is a big size. It wasn't that deep. I mean, the max at resorts is only $400 anyway, and because of his size, I didn't want to check raise. I mean, if he'd gone small medium, I probably would have, but he didn't. I still thought about it for a little bit, though, just to make it look like maybe I do have a hand I want to check raise, but I figure this guy has to have at minimum king, queen, or ace, queen. Any strong top pair, or better. And I don't know him, but I think the field would size down just a little bit from the size he picked if he had a draw weaker than mine. So I call, and the other guy folds. Now, the reason I bet zero on the flop was for the same reason I'd bet zero with any strong hand or draw when out of position. I just think I'll learn more about their range by seeing how they respond to the zero bet. I don't really expect, I mean, he's a new face, but I don't expect the OMC trainee to bluff too wide, so if he just calls the zero, then I'll see what I want to do on the next street. Okay, so the turn is a 9, no club, so Jack 10 is now the nuts. I bet zero again, and the OMC trainee called. And I thought, okay, great. Whatever he has, he probably doesn't want to stack off with it, so I'm just going to bluff, overbet, jam, a lot of rivers. But the river was an ace. Well, I'll be. So the pot is about $90, and I know I can't go too big. So I bet 20. And the first thing he says to me is, do you have aces? Okay, I lose. But let's see what I'm going to get nit-rolled with by this time. I at least know I'm beat, so it's not such a big deal. And he didn't even take that long. But it was still like a good 10 seconds. And during those 10 seconds, I was thinking, or more like praying, does he mean, do I have a pair of aces because he can't beat a pair of aces? But no, obviously not. I knew what he meant the first time. He meant pocket aces. And sure enough, he makes the hero call with top 2 pair, ace-queen. And then he says right after, I thought you had aces the whole hand. Now, when he said that, it's not the sort of statement that I can have a quick comeback for because it's going to take a little time to process the buffoonery of such a comment. So I allowed myself to do just that. But while I was processing it, I was also thinking a couple other things like, well, I guess if I had check raised the flop after he'd bet 30, then you have to figure since he'd already put me on squarely aces, then he'd have probably just snap show folded me that hand. And then I get to show the 7 of clubs and laugh myself all the way to the toilet to puke out the rest of my laughter. The other thing I thought was he basically 2-outed me on the river to not only win the hand, but also win more money. There's 2 aces left in the deck. If a brick comes, I'm jamming, and hard to imagine he's going to call, right? He decided I had pocket aces. If a club comes, I have the nuts. If a queen comes, I'm just going to bet zero and then fold to his raise, or just lose at showdown, most likely, if he calls the zero. If a 4-liner straight jack or 10 comes, I mean, that's a situation where I won't bluff jam, but I'll probably give it a shot and bet, I don't know, at least 70% of the pot. And given what he had, I'd say it's very unlikely he calls. But no. Instead, he gets one of the 2 cards left that gives me hope at going for thin value. Now, against him specifically, it might be too thin, but I don't care. Just like if you're never caught bluffing, that means you're not doing it enough. If you're not value betting the worst hand sometimes, then that means you're not going thin enough. But now enough time has passed, and I'm ready to start the Inquisition, and I said to him, why did you think I could have only had pocket aces and absolutely nothing else? He says something like, I thought you were really strong on the flop with how long you were taking. Okay. Now, to his credit, he did have the right read that I was thinking about something that must make my hand pretty good or at least interesting. But how does he just come to the immediate conclusion? when he already has an ace in his hand himself. That aces is the only hand I could possibly consider taking this line with. We don't know each other. I'm new to the game. He's never seen me before. But I'm betting $0 on the flop and then calling his raise. He can't think of one other fucking hand that might want to do that. Then he gets this river, this ace river, to give him top 2 pair. The ace in his hand cuts my combination of aces from 6 to 3. And now this river cuts it from 3 to 1, which is supposed to spare him that much more from thinking that aces is the only hand I could have had. And then he still announces it. Why? Because that's what the knit rollers do. That's what the old man coffees do. And this guy is going to be a great one. They all have to save themselves some face before they lose, just in case they do. He just wants to look like a mad genius for declaring that aces is the only hand I could have, even when we are now down to there being only one combination of it. Now, when I rank on players for the stupid things they say, I don't go on long rants, as you may have noticed. Not on the table to their face, anyway. That's what this podcast is for. I'm not going to run a therapy session at the game. So what I try to do instead is I try to make the brief comments I do make fill-packed with so much hatred and animosity that I end up cramming like 10 minutes worth of shitting on them into like 2 sentences. That way the entire table will still feel the entire wrath of 10 minutes, but I can get it over with quickly while still making my position quite clear. So it's basically like smoking DMT and tripping for 10 minutes instead of drinking ayahuasca and tripping for 10 hours. Do you have aces? Once again, guys, no. I gotta tell you, it's almost depressing sometimes watching how some of these players play and hearing the way they think. Because if this is how it's going to be when you sit down, isn't there like just, I don't know, something else you'd rather be doing? But let's just say I did have aces, right? He'd have felt like such a genius. Even though he's been wrong about making these kinds of very specific guesses 700 times in a row over the course of the last 5 years, now that he's finally struck lightning, this is all he's going to remember. So now he'll do this another 700 times over the next 5 years as he gets closer and closer and closer to completing his OMC training and get his diploma. But all right, so we get into day 2 of 2-hour sessions of 1-3. And this next story, God, I didn't really see what happened, but a pot was brewing, I know that. And there were like 2 or 3 players left on the river. And a young player, this kid, bet like 110, I think. I didn't see how big the pot was, but I'm guessing it was around 150 to 200. It's just a normal hand. The kid had about 200 behind, maybe 250, maybe 250. The board had not paired, but Jack, 8, 7 of hearts were all out there, plus a brick and I think an ace. So 10-9 makes the straight flush. The action is now on another OMC in trading. He's probably about 15 years away. Then he says, there's a 10-9 out there. I'll call. The kid said just to Jack. And this guy turns over ace, queen of hearts for the second nuts. Oh boy. Now, obviously choosing to not raise didn't matter this time since the kid was bluffing, but I wanted to stick my head in the oven after seeing and hearing that. Now, what pisses me off the most about this is the kid didn't have, like, the king high flush instead, because that would have been perfect. And what this guy deserved. People, this is no limit hold'em. You have to take a chance once in a while. You can't just sit there and wait all day, every day, for literally these stone-cold, absolute, unbeatable nuts. And it's the fucking overstatement of the year and of a lifetime to dare even insult the situation by declaring making a half-pot all-in raise with the ace-high flush in this spot a chance. Oh my fucking God. So of course we were all saying to him, wow, good call. How did you know that he was bluffing? And he didn't second guess his decision to do that one iota. He's just like, yep, good thing I played it carefully because he's either bluffing or he has me beat. You know, I thought of something recently as far as like, what is like actually going on in each poker game throughout the day. What makes us win and what makes us lose. And here's the best way I can put it. We're all trying to make our best decisions in each spot, but around the table at all times, when we're choosing to act, are floating numbers of poker EV. You know, you look around you every day and you see what you see, but like, I think a lot of us realize there's more out there than what meets the eye. And it applies perfectly to poker. There are floating numbers of EV. These numbers float around the table in the air, but you can't see them. They're invisible. But every time you make a decision, you're in essence trying to pick the optimal floating number out of the air and put it in your EV box. And this all starts with what your thought processes are and why. And then, of course, what decision you make. So if you make a good decision, that means you picked out of the air the most optimal EV number, that which is floating around. If you didn't, you'll have picked some shitty number that's not good for you. Now, if you're constantly in games where people are thinking about stupid things for stupid reasons and making stupid decisions, and you aren't, the money has to come to you sooner or later. But poker is so fucked up because you could be making all kinds of great decisions with great thought processes and have no idea it's even happening because you're not winning. And the opposition can be winning, but have no idea just how moronic they're being. They may turn over sensible hands in sensible spots, but that still doesn't mean they thought about anything sensibly. You don't know what anybody's thinking, but sometimes the deck just picks someone to lose, and whatever schmo is the beneficiary. But the floating numbers of EV, they can read your mind. And if you are not thinking about what's relevant, you are going to pay for it because you have to. Because this is a numbers game. So this expert who sees that in theory there's a chance he could lose and that his justification for not raising, he is going to get what's coming. You cannot outrun the variance forever. It is going to catch up with you. Now, it's true that variance can have an effect on what your true results should be. For instance, if you're a 5-10 crusher, then depending on the variance, you'll win somewhere between 10 and 12 big blinds, or maybe it's 8 and 10 big blinds. I don't know what the crushers win. The point is, the variance is not going to fuck you or help you so drastically over a long time period where your results are going to be completely upside down. If you play a couple thousand hours and are losing, then that's probably what you're worth, even if maybe the variance did fuck you a little harder than it should have. Now anyway, without witnessing the hand, I can guarantee you there is no sensible rhyme or reason as to why this man had any remote concern to think his opponent should be showing up with a straight flush here. He's just trying to save face, though, same as any other nit-rolling nobody who plays this game. No one who would ever just call with that on the river would do so in silence. They're all going to say something, either before or after making the decision. And it is insufferable just to bear witness to. But okay, on to the main event of this week's podcast. A friend told me a story last week. He was playing 2-5 at the win. The early position raiser, or someone in early position opens to 20. There's one call, and the button 3-bets to 60. And then my friend called 4-bets to 150 from the big blind with kings. But check this. The original raiser, in a disgusted manner, folds, but intentionally exposes an ace.
You are kidding, right?
In the middle of a 4-bet pot with 2 players left, this asshole is such a fucking self-centered crybaby that he decides not only is it okay for him to show fold one of his cards, he shows the most powerful one in the game, and therefore the one most likely to have an impact on the hand. And then it gets back to the button who 3-bet to 60, and with the use of this information, now he show folds that he had ace-king offsuit, and the hand just ends here. Now, you can talk about hidden variance and how all kinds of bizarre things can break for or against you, and for all we know, the guy who folded Ace King would have flopped Broadway and taken some money from the Kings, but that's not the point. He got to find out that one of his outs was gone, although he also found out now there's only one combo of aces left. And if it were the OMC trainee I mentioned in the first hand history of the day, he probably would have assumed that's what the big blind had, but what the button had and what he wanted to do with it isn't of any importance. It's the absolute fucking inconsiderate, selfish, disgraceful nerve of this trash piece of shit, fucking garbage dump, vomit, shit, stale, just cunt-hair, motherfucking miscreant who thinks it's okay for him to throw a pity party in a pot in which, he'd lost $20 in. How dare this prick do what he did? I don't think I've ever seen or heard of a situation as blatantly foul as this one. Now, we see shit like this all the time, and it's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And what I mean is that this has happened to all of us. We're on the fence about seeing a flop, but we fold, only to see we'd have nailed it and would have stacked like 4 people and won a trip to Bermuda. And it's brutal, but I don't care. You signed up to play poker. That means you're asking for trouble. Therefore, you are not entitled to throw a shit fit, an absolute shit fit, the moment you get it, and thus potentially tainting the outcome of the hand for everybody else. And it happens in major tournaments too. There's still a video online a long time ago of Mike Matusow and Sheiky. Sheiky wasn't even Sheiky yet. Nobody knew who he was. But he was in a spot where he folds pre and then slams his fist into the fucking table as hard as he can once the flop is dealt. I mean, gee, do you think maybe that might clue the other players into something about this hand and affect the way it's going to get played? Cards get turned over by accident sometimes, and it's bad enough that we even have to deal with that, but so be it. It's going to happen. But as I've said, no one can hide who they are at poker. And if you are a fucking baby, then it is going to rear its head one day, and probably a hell of a lot more often than that. And I wish, and have been wishing for years, that there could be some form of instant punishment that you can give to somebody immediately for acting like this, because this is on another level of immature unacceptability. And these people know they're not supposed to do that. Anybody with the slightest bit of common sense would know that. Anybody with 1/2 of one functional brain cell in their head would know that you are not allowed to do this under any circumstances. But nothing ever happens. All the floor ever fucking does for anything is say, please don't do that again. That's the warning they get. Please don't do that again. Those are the repercussions. Well, you know something? If all you ever do is warn people, then this isn't even a rule at all. The whole essence of a rule is that it is enforced. That's what makes the rule a rule. It's enforcement. If you don't enforce rules, then there's no point in even having them. Now, thankfully, tournaments do issue penalties of either 1 round or 2 rounds, or maybe it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes. I don't know what it is, but they do something, and that's great. Because you should not be allowed to do something like that and then just be dealt in for the next hand as if nothing happened. It's an embarrassment. It's letting everyone know that whenever you decide to, even if it's just once, you have total permission to pollute a hand and pollute the game. Now, I recognize that it's a lot easier to issue a penalty in a tournament because the player is guaranteed to want to come back. He has every incentive to keep playing. It's a tournament. So I know it's definitely trickier with cash and figuring out what exactly should be done, because what if the guy who did that is a whale and the last thing anyone wants to do is, have something that's going to drive him out of the game? Like, if a guy does that and then you make him sit out in orbit and now he has to post back in to play again, what if it's some big action fish and he leaves because he feels he's being mistreated? Or for any reason? Now you really have a disaster on your hands. And we know this won't happen in a tournament. But I don't care. Something has to be done, because cash game players should not be forced to be accepting of this garbage. I don't care how unusual it is. It's never supposed to happen at all, ever, under any circumstances. It is a huge foul. It is a massive violation to just intentionally expose a card in the middle of a hand with two other players left in a 4-bet pot, and it's the most powerful card in the deck. But nothing will test your patience and integrity like poker will, so we see what happens. The absolute worst in people comes out. But here's what I would do, and I don't think it's even that risky. I think it's fair. I would just ask the players who were directly affected, aka fucked, by this guy's intentional tainting and contamination of the hand if they want a penalty issued for this. That way, if it's a whale or anybody, you don't want to necessarily rub the wrong way or do anything that's going to make him want to leave, you can still avoid risking any scenario where you'd upset him. And that's important because the whole essence of cash game poker is playing with fish. In a tournament, you're looking for soft tournaments, but you're also committing to trying to outduel everybody, and it could be anybody, but that's not how it is in cash. Bum hunting is the essence of a cash game, to where you'll only stay for 8 minutes or up to 8 days, depending on how you feel about your edge. So if you don't want to risk losing a key customer, then you can just roll your eyes and accept that some customers are huge pains in the asses, and you just hope he doesn't do that again. But if it's some miserable reg nit, or any of the countless players who bring nothing to the table, both literally and figuratively, and is probably the only type of player who would ever even think of doing something like that, or if it's just someone you flat out don't like, or even if it is a fish, someone who you definitely think will not leave the game, but might even go on tilt after being served with this penalty, then fuck them. Let the one who got screwed in this exact scenario be the one to decide what's done with the offender. This player just fucked you, or could have fucked you, by his utter refusal to act like a grown-up. So it's only fair that the one who got screwed gets to decide to fuck him back. The floor saying, hey, please don't do that again, that does nothing. Because chances are the person who just intentionally exposed a very important card isn't going to do that again anyway, with or without a warning. They already got their release. And if they were willing to do it again, what are the chances that another spot comes up where they're so pissed off that they have to fold after putting a few pennies in that they can't help but expose one of their cards on purpose? Everyone knows they're not supposed to do this, but everyone also knows that you can just get away with anything. You can get away with just about anything once. They're only going to tell you not to do it again, and they probably won't do it again because now they know something could happen. They're not sure what, but something. But they shouldn't be allowed to get away with anything like that even one time. We're adults here. How many fucking warnings do you need? Why should you get a warning at all? So let the players weigh in. And I would say, if any of them say yes, you should penalize this guy. If any of them wants the guy in trouble for it, then that's what it should be. I go back and forth. Should it be the guy who got screwed, or should it be anyone from the table? I don't know. Maybe it should just be the guy who was affected by this. Maybe he should just be the one that decides. But if he decides yes, what should the penalty be? I don't know. At minimum, 1 round. And then straighten him out for 10 or 15 minutes too, like he's in kindergarten. Because that's how he acted. Ask him questions like he's in kindergarten. How would you like it if someone did that to you if you were in a hand? Would you like it if you were playing a pot with somebody and then someone showed one of their cards and it screwed you out of some money because of what their actions were? This is how you have to fucking talk to people, because this is how they act. And you know something? If the guy wants to leave, then by all means, just get the fuck out of here. Because who the hell wants this in their poker room anyway? So yeah, just let the impacted players decide if these assholes should be punished. And if you don't punish them, then it's just letting them know this is what you think of them. These entitled, burnt-out pissers who still can't believe they didn't go on to be the best poker player in the world. Look what the game has done to them. These self-righteous, self-centered children who don't give a shit about the fact that everyone else's decisions and money is just as important as theirs. Piece of shit. We'll see you next time. Let's go Mets.